visionary for a shared territory or something like this. So I kind of thought too much about that. And so rather than giving an overview of the whole of the Look Festival, I've just kind of inflected my presentation to look at the relationship with Liverpool in particular. So I'll try to give you that overview, but I'll also try to talk particularly about work that we're doing and the ways that we work, which focus on that primary territory for the Festival of Liverpool. Now, paradoxically, having said that, the roots of the festival lie in Look13, which was a kind of mini festival or a season of events that was organised by Red Eye, which is a not-for-profit photography network that some of you will know, in Manchester in 2007. Manchester is about 50 kilometres to the east of Liverpool, and it's very unusual for any kind of cultural or other endeavour to begin in Manchester and migrate to Liverpool or vice versa, because there's a very strong history between the two cities of kind of fraternal competition, antagonism. So they're very close together geographically and culturally in many ways, but they're resolutely facing apart, and historically they've always been competing in the 19th century, in the early 20th century, in kind of industrial and economic terms, and now most visibly through football. So the Look Festival began in Manchester with Look13, and despite its roots in Manchester, it inspired a small group of photographers who work across the Northwest, led by Colin McPherson, who you'll meet later, who's presenting this afternoon, to hatch an ambition for a regular international festival in Liverpool. To give you a little bit of background about Liverpool, some of which kind of seems really resonant with our setting here in Porto, Liverpool was a major port and a major industrial centre, a major industrial city, whose economic decline began really in the mid-20th century, and since before the Second World War, the population of Liverpool has roughly halved. So there's a big industrial infrastructure in the city. There's been a shrinking population for a long time. That's turned around. The kind of high levels of unemployment and poverty that you'd expect with that picture. And recently, the turnaround that I'm referring to has been a regeneration based on a service economy, visitor economy, with culture playing a very important role. So why did that group of photographers choose Liverpool to develop the festival? To take just three reasons, Liverpool has a very strong history of photographic activity, particularly, well, actually across making, collecting and exhibiting. It's the home of OpenEye, which I used to be the director of, but which since 1977 has been one of the UK's leading photography galleries and was one of the first. And OpenEye has been working in Liverpool, commissioning, exhibiting, collecting photography since then. And it has a really strong infrastructure for visual arts. And throughout that infrastructure, there's a really strong engagement with photography. So after Look13, a number of years passed, and people within the city, within Liverpool, along with that group of locally based photographers, worked to create the first edition of Liverpool International Photography Festival, which was Look11. And the theme of that festival was photography as a call to action in a kind of social, primarily in a social, political sense. So Look13 picked up on the political character of Look07, which was titled The Democratic Image, and it fitted in and responded very much to Liverpool's history and sense of itself as a radical, renegade, oppositional city, which that kind of self-image within the city, and it's an image that is shared outside the city. It's an external perception as well, is based in recent history on a very well-publicised Dockers strike in the mid-90s. Before that, in the 80s, there was a very militant left-wing council which took on Thatcher and lost in the graveyard of such political and cultural battles. And Liverpool sees itself as broadly against the grain, proudly different, as a provocative kind of city, a city that is exceptional in various different ways. Look13 had a wide range of different exhibitions and events. I won't go into any detail, but it was vibrant, very diverse, but also kind of unstructured, relatively unstructured and kind of anarchic. And in that respect, it was a bit like its host city. So Look13, what did we do 2 years later for the second edition of the festival? We had the usual range of activities, exhibitions, artists and curators talks, competitions, participative engagement projects, a symposium, screenings, portfolio events, and a parallel programme, which is the title that we gave to our Fringe. I don't expect you to read all this. You'll be glad to hear. The festival theme for Look13 was Who Do You Think You Are? And it looked at what happens when we turn the camera on ourselves to create images of identity, subjectivity, and the self. And in a way, this was conceived as a reversal of the 2011 theme. So in 2011, we asked what happens when you point the camera at the world as an intervention, a kind of an activist intervention, in an effort to change it. And in 2013, we looked at what happened when you turn that through 180 degrees and point the camera at yourself and ask questions about the self. And again, this theme has a particular resonance in Liverpool because, as I said, it perceives itself as different, as exceptional, and that's an internal and external perception, and it's sometimes charged in a very positive way and sometimes in a very negative way. The core programme of the festival was delivered in close collaboration with the key venues of the festival, and each of the venues responded to the theme in ways that fitted with their different specialisms, priorities, and audiences. So the festival, in its 2013 incarnation, was co-produced and hosted by some of the city's leading museums and galleries. And that collaborative curatorial model is very important, and it's a distinctive feature of the festival. So in 2013, Look had an artistic director. It was my job to be the artistic director as part of my broader role as director. But I worked really closely with each of the venue curators in the different venues that presented the core projects. And each of those venues, or the key venues amongst those, is also represented on the festival's board. So in terms of strategy and in terms of the ongoing operation of the festival as well, Look is rooted in those venues. It belongs to the venues. The venues kind of, the festival is the venues, and the venues are the festival to a great extent. I'm just going to quickly point to some of those venues which form the backbone of the core artistic programme. This is the Blue Coat, which is a contemporary arts centre in central Liverpool. The Walker Art Gallery, which is the Municipal Art Museum. Open Eye Gallery, which I've already mentioned, specialist photography gallery. The Museum of Liverpool, which is a fairly recently opened city museum. It's about 2 or 3 years old. And the 2 university galleries, the Victoria Gallery and Museum, which is part of Liverpool University, and the Exhibition Research Centre, which is a new gallery-based research centre in the Liverpool John Moores University School of Art. The programme, I'm going to talk about primarily, as I said, about the elements of the programme that speak most directly to the city and of the city. At the Blue Coat, there was a contemporary group exhibition, an international exhibition called I Exist in Some Way. Alongside that, a smaller exhibition, collection-based exhibition from the Side Photographic Collection, which is a Newcastle-based gallery with an amazing collection in the north of England. And that was Sandoweji, a historical two-hander. And Identity Documents, which was a solo exhibition, the first solo exhibition by a young, emerging, Liverpool-based photographer called Adam Lee. At the Walker Art Gallery, again, 3 exhibitions. The first was a new commission by Rankin, the fashion and celebrity portrait photographer, primarily, who many of you will know, a project called Alive in the Face of Death. Double Take, portraits from the Keith Medley archive. This was curated by 2 invited curators, external curators, called Mark Durden and Ken Grant. And Double Take was made up of studio portraits from a Merseyside portrait studio, which worked throughout the 50s, 60s and 70s in a really interesting and obsolete way, by the 60s and 70s obsolete way, with a customized camera which made 2 exposures side by side on a single glass plate, to give a really striking, unusual effect. And the curators went back to this archive, to these objects, and exhibited them in a way that they were never intended, as kind of double portraits in this museum show. So usually it was a single sitter who was photographed a few seconds later, maybe in a slightly different pose or a variation on the first shot, and sometimes maybe for economic reasons, 2 sitters were squeezed onto the one plate. The third exhibition at the Walker was Every Man and Woman is a Star, which is another two-hander, another collection-based show, and it combines early work, mostly unseen work, by Martin Parr and Tom Wood. Both Martin Parr and Tom Wood were based on Merseyside, which is the Liverpool area, on the River Mersey, for many years in the 1980s. Tom Wood stayed until about 10 years ago. Martin Parr moved on in the mid-1980s. And the title comes from this picture by Tom Wood, which was accepted for the Merseyside Artists Open exhibition in the mid-1980s. And Tom asked this couple, who he bumped into, to pop into the gallery when they were organising the exhibition and leave their names so that he could caption the photograph with their names. So they came in, he wasn't there. Rather than leaving their names, they just wrote on the back of the back of the print, "Every man and woman is a star." And so that became, that was written on the back of this print, that became the title of this work and the exhibition. And Martin Parr, who you will all know very well, this is a picture from The Last Resort, which is a project he made in New Brighton in the mid-1980s, which was first shown at Open Eye in 1986 in an exhibition called The Last Resort, which was actually an exhibition of work by Martin Parr and Tom Wood together. And this small collection-based exhibition focused on the early, unseen, relatively unknown, I should say, rather than unseen, Merseyside work of both photographers. 2 exhibitions, solo contemporary exhibitions at Open Eye Gallery. I think I probably don't have time to go into detail about those. Another 2 exhibitions, Blackout is a group exhibition, more a kind of contemporary art, conceptually led show with two artists presenting video works and 2 artists presenting kind of installation, photo-based installation works. And The Queen, the Chairman and I is a solo exhibition by Kurt Tong. And at the Museum of Liverpool, there was an exhibition called Mersey-Style by the Caravan Gallery, who will be familiar from other festivals. They're an amazingly dynamic and well-travelled duo. And they set up camp in cities all over the world with their Caravan Gallery. This is actually Tokyo rather than Liverpool, I think. And they shoot their own work. They're a mobile gallery. They invite the public in and they do all sorts of interactive work, which invites the public in a particular place to kind of re-experience their familiar everyday surroundings through photography in a different kind of skewed, surreal way. And the work they do often has an absurd, humorous kind of dimension. Another very, very strongly Liverpool-based exhibition within the festival was at Walstenham Creative Space, which is a small artist-led venue which hops around from between different temporary places in the city. And they work with a photographer called Rob Bremner, who studied near Liverpool in the 1980s and made a project that he never finished, hence Liverpool Unfinished, which is a really extraordinary body of work, and it was unknown to anybody, I think, certainly unpublished and unexhibited until this year's festival, this year's Look13, and it was really one of the highlights of the festival. So this work was made in the 1980s by Rob wandering the streets of Liverpool, I think into the early 90s as well. On the events front, Look13 ran a long launch weekend in mid-May, and there was a nominal festival period of a month. Many of the key exhibitions, the ones that I've just referred to, ran for 2 months or 10 weeks. But the main festival period was a month, running from the launch in mid-May to mid-June. At the heart of that long launch weekend was a series of major events produced by Red Eye. And the centrepiece of those events was the National Photography Symposium, which is primarily aimed at photographers and brings in a really broad church of contributors from across the industry. And the main launch night, the exhibition's preview night and the official festival launch night coincides with Liverpool's Light Night, which is a kind of long night, nuit blanche, in which museums and galleries and all sorts of other cultural venues and cultural activities run late into the night, and it's a very kind of social event as well. And they do a thematic programming thing across the Light Night events. And for this year's festival, they took the theme from the Look13 theme, Who Do You Think You Are, and worked around themes of memory for the cross-programming of all sorts of different work, from street theatre to musical projects and so on throughout Light Night. Another major event in the festival was Photo Pulse, which was a pressure couture style event that we organised with 10 presentations by rising stars of the UK photography scene, all making presentations, slideshows that respond to the festival theme. Actually, Chloe D. Matthews was one of the contributors, and she'll be here tomorrow. This is Jenny Wicks, who is presenting a project called Root Ginger. And Made in Liverpool was another key event for the festival and another key Liverpool event. It was a competition for local photographers which looked at Liverpool identity through the title of the project, Made in Liverpool. It asked, what does it mean to be made in Liverpool? What does it mean to make work in Liverpool? The winners, there were 10 winning portfolios. The winners of this project had their work screened at the after party on Light Night, in a great new, fairly recent venue in Liverpool called Camp and Furnace. And there you can see some suggestions about what it means to be made in Liverpool, what it means to be Liverpudlian. Scouse, I don't know if you can even read that. A Scouser is a person from Liverpool, a Liverpudlian. And lastly, the Parallel programme, that's the title we gave to our fringe of independent projects which sprung up in response to the festival, or just coincided with the festival, but were of a nature that resonated with what we were doing. So most of the fringe, most of the Parallel programme projects took place in the street or in cafes or in disused shops, but it stretched right through to major exhibitions at Tate Liverpool and in some of the other larger institutions. And this is one of the most memorable projects from the Parallel programme. It's a project called Stranded, which was, as you can see, installed in various public realm street spaces. It was organised by Red Eye under their Lightbox programme, which is a professional development programme that they've run for a couple of years. And the programme produces a series of collectives, temporary collectives, which produce work, and all of the collectives produced work and exhibited work as part of Look13 this year. This was the Blind Spot Collective, and they made their Stranded project, working with retired Merchant and Royal Navy seamen and Wrens, that's the Women's Royal Navy Service, all of whom served in the Battle of the Atlantic operations during the Second World War. And this met up with wider city anniversary activities around the 70th anniversary of the Battle of the Atlantic. I think that's it. Thank you very much.
You can stay here.
Okay.
Eu agora convidava os outros oradores, Luís, Jacob, Christoph, se poderiam se juntar a nós. Não sei se quiserem fazer perguntas. Temos um curto espaço para debates, uns 15, 20 minutos, para depois irmos almoçar. E depois voltaremos, depois do almoço, depois do debate e do almoço, voltaremos aqui às 3 horas para ter o painel com os fotógrafos. Exatamente, às 3 horas estamos aqui todos de volta para acompanhar o painel dos fotógrafos. Não se acanhem e podem colocar algumas perguntas aqui aos nossos convidados.
Porto with pleasure.
Is they seem to happen in places where there's a demand, there's a critical mass of people who want it to happen, there's the energy, because it's hard work doing a festival. Yeah, it's fun, absolutely, as well, but it takes somebody with who, it's not a comfortable job. You put a lot of time and energy into it. You need some vision, you need to work all the time on it, and have the people around you who also want it to happen. It's quite difficult to have two festivals in one city, but I think Porto is big enough maybe for that to happen. You have to think carefully about the timing of it as well, and what audiences you might share or be different with as well, and what venues you're using so you don't clash. So it's quite important to consider those things as well as the timings of other festivals around the world. So, for example, Arles is a very popular photo festival. So if you coincided your dates with that festival, it wouldn't be a good move. So you have to really understand the context, visit a lot of festivals and kind of see how they work, and how as an audience member you participate in it, and what ingredients you would involve and include as well. I mean, one thing is just, the way we started ours was just naively getting on with it and doing it, not thinking about too much about what it is we're doing and why we're doing it, how we're doing it. We just got on and did it. And we learnt a lot through doing, and obviously when you sustain over the years, you get better and better, and it does take time to craft the festival and understand what it is you're doing and how it can work better in the city, and what partners you can work with, and funding, and how to keep it going. The hardest thing is actually keeping it going for a number of years and sustaining the funding and maintaining expectation, because the longer you go for, the more expectation audiences have on you to kind of grow or develop or do something more and better or bigger or whatever. But maintaining quality and also finding the amount of money that you need for it as well, actually, to make it bigger is a tricky thing. But basically just getting on with it and doing it, but doing it in a smart way so that you understand, so you're not elbowing or stepping on too many people's toes.
I believe so that there are two things just to start a festival. The most important is the vision, what Luis mentioned. Like, it should be diverse and first of all different from the festivals that are going on in Europe right now, because we are living in this festival culture, and it's kind of difficult right now to develop the idea that it's really touching and it's really catchy. I don't know how to say it. It's really different from everything what is going on in Europe right now. So first the vision, and then actually you also mentioned kind of determination. You have to be really strong to fight. It's not an easy work, and it's a lot of struggling with funding, basically. So the result, the festival itself, is just 1 week. It's amazing, but beside that, it's 1 year of hard work, sitting in the office and sending thousands of emails and signing tons of agreements. So as far we all know, it's really like a lot of bureaucracy also, but determination, and but if we have clear vision and we decide to fight, not to give up. I know it's a banal kind of, but really it's a lot of fighting. So then with two things, I believe that Porto has everything, because when we focus on the other features, like, it's a perfect actually spot, because it's Porto. So I don't have to discuss, it's Porto. And then you have all the features that the festival city has to have. You have audience, you have Ryanair flights, and all these practical things that the city should have. And I think I believe the size of the city is also very important. It's not as big as London, Paris, Moscow, Tokyo, which is completely too big to get this festival feeling. And it's not too small also, because I believe it's quite hard to do the festival in the really, really small places. So Porto is just perfect to develop the new projects. Good luck.
I would say also use your resources. I mean, you have the photography university, which that means tons of photographers that are willing to help out and see the vision through, whether it be interning or also pooling resources to make it happen. So.
I think another thing just to add to that, it was a good question to spark off other thoughts, was around making the festival unique to the place and relevant to the people here, as well as thinking about how you attract an international audience. And as Christoph said, there are so many photo festivals and they are homogenizing and becoming fairly similar in the ingredients that are on offer. There's an interesting one that's happening in Italy soon around management photography. So it's kind of, there are some opportunities to do something quite unusual and really kind of see, get an overview somehow and see what's going on around the world and see how you can do things differently and how you can either change through the theme or through the kind of the focus and content of the festival and the structure of it, whether it lasts for 2 days or whether it lasts for a year, or kind of change. I think there's some opportunity to challenge and change the model as well. Good luck.
Mais perguntas?
I was recently in Arles for les Rencontres photographiques, and I was amazed because it's so large and there was so much work from very different sensibilities. Obviously, that festival has changed the city, and it's been going on for over 40 years. But do you think that festivals change the way that local people deal with visual arts and arts in general? Do you think that festivals can educate and also bring more people into the arts?
Yeah, absolutely. I think it is very much the case. Once they get up and running, it takes several years for them to establish. Obviously, Arles has been going for a long time, and it has a critical mass. People also bring projects to Arles and set up temporary spaces as well, and they're uninvited and getting the voice off. So the fringe of Arles is very, very busy and full. Talking personally about the city where I do my festival from, it doesn't have a natural arts audience. It's really built up over the years. It has students, but the local people aren't necessarily, they're more into football, they're more into cricket or whatever, going out and drinking than coming into an art gallery. So it really has established, and that's one of the reasons why we do the engagement and participation programs, to induct people and encourage people to encounter what art is actually, and it isn't just coming into a gallery space. It's something that you can participate in and have and contribute your ideas to, and be, have a taste of it yourself. Also, it's interesting in terms of how people travel to the city. We kind of assessed that we had over 60% of people travelling in from outside, from around the world and from around England, coming into Derby. So the impact of that on local businesses and things like, there's a pancake maker in the marketplace in the city centre, and they ran out of cooking materials because they had so many people coming to kind of taste the speciality of the city. So they remember that, and they're anticipating the festival next time. They're going to stock up more and get excited, you know. So I think slowly it does start to filter through, and as you integrate things into the city and use unusual spaces and really embed it in the city, then it does make a big impact.
I was going to say, I think one thing, especially for New York, since it already is sort of an arts hub to the world, I think one thing that you can sort of think about whenever you think about photo festivals is the people that wouldn't normally step into a gallery, don't necessarily appreciate photography on the day-to-day. Those are the ones that you can really make the biggest impact with, I think, is these people that might be in the neighborhood, or they hear about a photography festival, don't necessarily know what it is, but they're going to discover new work. Whether they are going to care forever, it's something that's going to stick with them. And I think that there's value in that.
I fully agree. And the example from Poland, from Łódź, is like, we have a really bad football team in Łódź, so they cannot gather 5,000 people. And last year, at the opening, only for 2 hours, we have 4,000 people at the vernissage of the festival. So it was like a kind of success for us. And basically, there are also people that they are not going to the museums, they are not going to the openings, but they came because it's kind of mass event about photography. So just once a year they are coming, and it's good to attract people that are basically not interested so much in art. And another like good example is when I've seen the guide, the book about Poland in New York this year, and I opened and the second sentence was that the Łódź is the city of photo festival. I was really happy that it's kind of already part of identity of the city. So although we have all these financial problems, when we announce, I am sure that when we announce that we stop doing festival, there will be a lot of support. So we are even thinking about that because we are already like a part of the identity. So we want to announce, okay, the festival is stop being organized, and maybe then help will come.
I think there's another thing about the nature of photography as well. So many people have mobile phone cameras and cameras themselves. It's a very democratic medium, or something that nearly everybody has had a, experienced or done or is doing, and so it's something. So we were thinking about how to tap into social networks and kind of fluid practice. A lot of people are photographing thousands of images throughout their lives currently and sharing them online, but how do you actually engage that general public who thinks they don't want to come to a gallery in a photo festival situation? So the opportunity of photography is that a lot of people think they understand it in some ways, but how to get better, and people are starting to want to become better photographers, and they're getting feedback through their social networks and so on. So something about a photography festival to engage and access a mass audience is, it's an interesting opportunity for us as festivals to also engage in how to become better photographers, how to read images, and how to become better storytellers, or how to bridge the gap between the kind of popular photography of the social media with high, very established and brilliant practitioners. So that's something that we're quite interested in tackling.
Actually, I would like to mention the example from Derby. I was so much impressed this year when it was, like you said, mentioned, like -2 or something. It was really, really cold. It was pouring, raining. And on the market in Derby, there was like hundreds of people with umbrellas waiting. It was like amazing for me to see this.
It's definitely the coolest festival, isn't it?
I've been there. Yeah, it was really cool.
that example was the launch of the festival, and something that also kind of football analogies, not football, but kind of how you get a massive crowd for photography, sometimes through music, or this time we had fireworks at our launch, and we and everyone loves fireworks, and we had thousands of people. We had about 2,000 or more people, and it was raining and practically snowing.
And free drinks.
And they were
in New York, it's
free drinks.
Free beer, yeah.
But you kind of think about how you can, not so trick people, but how you can coach them nicely through to come and encounter the festival when they might not otherwise do so. Yeah, but that was a difficult match because the people coming for the fireworks weren't interested in the speeches by our... They started heckling.
The speeches is always a problem. Yeah.
So we cut them short, but that was
when are
tricky.
the fireworks?
It's true. They started shouting. But yeah, it was a good event. Yeah.
Tens de falar com o microfone.
Just a small question. As we know, the photography world has been changing quite a lot in the last few years in terms of the professional level, magazines and newspapers not publishing, and I think in a way, I don't know, I'd like to have a view upon festivals as being an alternative way of publishing the work that you don't see in the editorial world anymore. And someone just like to know, I don't know, I think festivals have been changing as well the way people perceive photographers, a new state as a photographer, as a, let's say, as a star, a celebrity. Just like to have your view upon what's been the influence of the festival upon professional photographers, not photography in overall. Amateur photography is one thing, and we know it's very relevant. It's as you said, is the most democratic, or one of the most democratic art forms. And for that sense, it's very accessible for everyone. I think it's very important, the festivals, to make people aware and experience the thing. But professional-wise, people that make a living out of photography, because as a professional, I sense a lot of the festivals, and I don't want to sense one in particular, of course, that there are a lot of festivals, a lot of competitions, photography, but then you go to rules, a lot of them you have to pay to go in, and you don't get nothing, and a lot of them, and actually happens here in Portugal, I'm not referring one, but just by participating in the competition, even if you didn't win anything, the competition could use the image whatever use they wanted. So you just say, that's not fair enough. You know, if you are a professional, a lot of times it gets in conflict what you do. So just to have a view, what's the relation between festivals and the professional photography?
I think that's really a very interesting question. I mean, it's so striking, isn't it? The proliferation of photo festivals. You know, in the UK, in the space of 8 or 9 years, we've gone from having 1 or 1.5 or 2 to having suddenly kind of a glut of festivals, which can't all be sustainable if they're looking to public funding sources to do what they do. And there's a really big dilemma around the scenario that you're talking about of having, I mean, you know, one way to fund a big exhibition and to engage with a large number of professionals is to charge people to enter a competition. And I think we can probably all think of examples of that appearing to be done quite cynically. And it's something that we discussed in Liverpool, and we decided we weren't going to go down that road, and our current plan is still not to go down that road, but it leaves us with, I mean, that and other dilemmas leave you with a diminishing range of ways to build a resource base for what you're doing. So I think if you're organising a festival, you're kind of, on one level, you're driven by enthusiasm and passion to make something happen that you want to happen. On another level, you're responding to a need which is kind of manifesting itself in the UK anyway, in all of these new festivals. And they provide potentially a great space and a stage for ambitious professionals and others to be brought together with other kinds of photographers, but a stage to bring a really attentive audience to ambitious new work. But the biggest dilemma, the biggest challenge is how do you resource that?
I think another thing to add to kind of the photo competition debate, because it is very, you have to be selective in the ones that you choose to participate in. Not all of them extort the photographers that are submitting. Not all of them are too expensive, and some of them are, genuinely trying to support photography and give opportunities and use the money that comes in as a resource to support the people that get selected as well. I know from being on several photo competition juries myself that the process of looking through the work that's submitted, because often the competition has a theme or whatever, so the ones that get through to the exhibitions or whatever the treat is at the end are participating in it, but through the process of looking at all that work, there are other opportunities. I've found photographers through that way that I've worked with in different contexts for other exhibitions, and I know other jury members that do that. So in terms of visibility and being proactive, it is a useful thing to do some in a year, not go for loads, but pick the ones that you think are more ethical and more interesting and have the better opportunities and have good juries or whatever. They are useful in terms of visibility, but yeah, don't waste too much money on them. But we do charge for hours, for example, and we use that money towards being able to support the participating photographers. We're a non-profit organisation, we're not there to kind of use the money to grow our building or anything kind of specific like that. We actually invest it straight back into the people that get selected. We select a lot of people as well, and we genuinely work with those photographers that get through and make sure that they're supported. And other things in terms of professional photographers, the meeting place, the site of the festival itself, coming to things like this, talking to other people and facilitating networking and interaction is really important. You can, people get work out of those sites if you don't go there necessarily with that agenda, but through the natural process of getting to know people, building up friendships over time and so on. Also, portfolio reviews are really crucial, and those one-to-ones with people. We're all really busy, and artists are busy as well, but to actually take time out and have the 20 minutes one-to-one to talk about what you do and get to know the organisation that you're sitting next to is really key for people's career development as well, professionally.
Can I go? I also think it's a rather good thing in the festivals that they're really open and democratic, because we also charge for submissions, but it's like I think 20 euros. So it's just we use it as a fundraising, as a crowdfunding, to get the money for the prize, which is 3,000 euros, and just to get the money for the exhibitions that we organize for the finalists. So we are also non-profit, and I think it is good because basically it gives opportunity to hundreds of photographers to be selected, and I don't see any risk in this field, but there is a risk, I think, and I'm not happy about this, what is happening in the portfolio review market, let's call it market, when photographers are paying sometimes $1,000 or 1,000 euros almost, just to meet 5 or 6 curators. It's kind of, I think it's this kind of portfolio reviews, they spoiled this idea of meeting people, of democratic access, and to be honest, this is the first time that I decided, because I was also part of this business, I was going to this portfolio reviews, and I don't think it's the relation between the curators, editors, and photographers were like kind of equal. I didn't feel comfortable in this situation, and I don't think it's a good idea to make a business on photographers that, as you mentioned, sometimes and most of the time they don't have anything from it, because maybe one for, I don't know, 50 is selected somewhere. So we do portfolio reviews, but we charge 25 or 30 euros just to have money for coffee for everybody, for curators and for photographers. So I think it's possible to make it in a good way, but I don't like this direction of making business out of it. And it's really visible in a few, I don't want to mention the name of the portfolio reviews.
Censorship. You're censored.
Okay. Okay. Thanks, Houston.
The one thing I wanted to mention too, with charging for submissions to the photo festival, I mean, if you didn't have that, again, everyone mentioned it's a revenue source to have that money go back into the festival, to produce exhibitions, to make things happen. If you didn't offer that aspect of allowing photographers to submit work and just cut that off, the money would come from someplace else, but also this is giving emerging photographers a chance to be in the festival that they wouldn't otherwise have if they weren't picked by a curator. It really opens it up because you can do a pretty large show, depending if you want to do a 10-person show, if you want to do a 20-person show from this work. It's giving those 20 photographers that were selected a chance to be in a photography festival alongside, say, someone much larger. Sure, no. Yeah. I don't necessarily think. I don't think festivals are a way for photographers to make money necessarily directly from the festival. It's from the exposure, perhaps. Is that what you're getting at? So I mean, again, I think for any photographer, it's better to have your photographs in a festival as opposed to in a gallery, because, you know, as we've all said, there's so many more so many more audience members coming to see your work in places like this. So really big name photographers, for example, Bruce Davidson in New York, you know, he had me come pick up prints at his house because he wanted to be a part of it. So badly, because he'd rather see his work there than just in a gallery or just on a pages of a magazine.
Exchange to be musicians, to play in music festivals and get loads of money.
Sure, yeah.
All right. Okay. Thanks anyway.
Se houvesse mais uma pergunta, eu propunha que depois fosse mais uma só e depois concluíssemos, que convidávamos quem quiser depois acompanhar o almoço, porque temos que estar aqui de volta por volta das 3, para não perdermos a programação. Não sei se alguém tem mais alguma pergunta. Então.
Hello. Okay. I was just wondering, and concerning to the first question about how difficult sometimes it is to get the money to build up a festival. I was just wondering if about all of you. I was noticing that all of you are from countries that have a big tradition with the photographic history and visual arts, and that, in my opinion, is something that not happen in Portugal. So I was wondering if that tradition that exists in England, United States, or Poland, if it helps in the fundraising to put up a photo festival.
Not necessarily. I think with photography, it's still quite recent. You know, recently we've only just got a curator at the Tate for photographs, and I think the way that photography has been treated in the UK hasn't really been that established since it's only recent times, since the 1990s onward. And Brian knows much better than me, but because he's been through the whole set of changes. But obviously, arts and culture in the UK is pretty established. There's a lot of museums and art galleries and so on. But photography still is, in some ways, surprisingly a fringe medium, and I think that's another thing that Patrick just mentioned. It's only since basically 2004 and so on that the photo festivals have started to be more popular in the UK. So it's still a struggle. It's not easy for us. We're still having to tell the story. Why are we medium specific? Why are we a photography festival and not a photography and related media or contemporary arts or whatever festival? So we're sticking with photography, and we think that's relevant. But it doesn't make it easier for us. If we became more generic, maybe for a short time it would get a bit of money in. But I don't know. Sometimes when you do something new in a country that isn't used to it, then sometimes that's a benefit, because you kind of go, oh, you get more attention because people find it exciting and new and whatever. So I think it's difficult also when you're in a place that has established structures and thinks it knows what it's talking about. So yeah, it's always hard wherever you are, I think.
First of all, I wouldn't underestimate estimate Portugal, because you have so many museums of photography, museum in Porto, museum the Imagen in Braga, and probably in Lisbon and the south of Portugal. And each small city used to have some festival or have even a small local festival, but I've heard about many like Coimbra, Guimarães, and so on and so on. And I think in Poland it was even harder. Like 10 years ago when we started the festival, the main question was if photography is art. Like there were many biennale or festivals of visual art, but never separated only with photography. So we were struggling at the beginning just to put the photography more visible. And I think it's of course much easier in France, England, and I don't know in how is it that in New York, because there is a market. And this is actually also the answer for the question why photographers are not so well paid in the festivals. I mean, of course, a festival is not the tool of earning money, because we cannot collect so much, and there is not so big market like in the music festivals, when we can get so much money from the tickets. So I think if the market will develop, but it's also open question. Like if we stop buying cameras right now, the last results are like this year there's 40% less sold cameras. So like in the future we will just photograph with the mobile phone cameras. So this is another question, if we can find sponsors for the future festivals. Okay, this was not the answer for the question, but I will not underestimate Portugal. I think you have a great field and background in photography.
I think it's worth saying that, I mean, to kind of demystify things a little bit and just talk about basics. In the case of the Look Festival in Liverpool, almost all of our cash funding comes from the Arts Council, which is indirect government money and National Lottery money, and from the City Council. In our 3 editions or 2 editions in Liverpool, we haven't succeeded in bringing in any substantial private money in terms of commercial, of corporate sponsorship. We can't charge for ticketing apart from for specific events. We can't charge, as they do in Arles, for entrance to the festival exhibitions, because all of the venues that we collaborate with, all of the venues that co-produce our programme with us, are free venues, and occasionally they'll have charging exhibitions within their walls, but it's not really feasible within the kind of local ecology to do that. And so we'll only survive if we can hang on to that public funding, but that's currently, that's absolutely our base, is Arts Council, public funding, and City Council funding, municipal funding, and then build private money in the form of donations, ticketed activities that bring in money somehow, sponsorship, if we can secure it. It's very, very difficult. I mean, I don't know if, have you succeeded in getting any significant cash sponsorship from corporate
A lot of
partners?
it's in kind in terms of production, but this year we had more cash contributions from companies, which is a big increase for us. Yeah.
So look, our funding comes from those public sources, but I mean, actually, that cash funding is really small. It pays for a very, very tiny operation, and in fact, I think you probably wouldn't believe how tiny it is if I went into detail. And the programme money that we have is laughable. So the way we produce a programme, and the reason I talked about those core venues that we participate and contribute to the programme, is because basically our artistic programme is produced by our partners with their resources, and we collaborate with them and they contribute to the festival, and that's how it happens. So it's the existing resources within the existing infrastructure, most of which in Liverpool is publicly funded, all of which is publicly funded, I should probably say, and other public funding. So, you know, that's a very different model from your model in New York. You said $500,000 of corporate sponsorship. Is that right?
Sure. I mean, it depends on the year. Last year was smaller.
Really short.
Sure.
Unless we don't eat.
I guess all I'll say is, you know, it comes from corporate sponsors. Like I said, it's just expensive in terms of shipping work, getting artists over for the talks. But all the money goes back into the festival. It's not like it comes from, you know, goes into anyone's pocket really.
If I can just say one sentence for the end.
Shortly.
Very shortly. I want to just give you the idea what kind of sponsors we have for 12 years, and it says so much about the photographic market. We started with Ilford Photo Festival, then it was ACFA, then we had Canon, then we had Nikon for 3 years, then we switched for Samsung Photo Festival for 2 years, then Break, and now we have a fashion company sponsoring us.
Bom, convido a todos, então, quem vai almoçar connosco é no assador. Quem não vai almoçar, estamos aqui todas as 3 para o outro lado dos festivais, para os fotógrafos. Obrigado.